So, welcome everybody. Let me introduce you to Susan Dutton. She professionally is an emotional intelligence coach. And actually, you were that before you found Aikido. Is that right? Yep.
That is right.
Yeah. But I think we're going to find there are just a few parallels between those two, and that's really what we're about to explore tonight. For those of you that don't know what emotional intelligence is, I'm going to just show a video. So let me just share the screen. And that's where we're going to start tonight. It's not that bad. Okay.
Sadly, we live in a world where our basic needs of security and sense of safety is being challenged.
I think the forces of disconnection and stress and isolation are intense.
The heart is affected by emotions, and emotions affect people.
Because I feel the suffering that people have in their families, in their communities, and in organizations. And I think we need to help people find a way through that.
There's no focus on individual emotions. There's no one asking about how you...
How do I increase the sound?
I was wondering, it should...
We are becoming less people-oriented and more machine-oriented, I would say.
Introducing them to themselves for conversations with you. That is usually the process where you meet who you are.
Their voices are all right.
Yes, well, that's
It's
why
the video.
it's a film, don't worry.
Being grateful and balanced. Enjoy the beauty and wisdom of emotion.
The first word that came to mind is caring.
I would say mindfulness.
Disruptive.
Emotional intelligence is being smart with our feelings.
Good morning.
Annabelle says she thought this might happen, but I had no imagination that 20 years later we would be sitting here with people in 25 countries in Dubai from all around the world. What a miracle.
Conferences. For those of you who are new, just take seconds to think you come here today to sit and look and listen. You are wrong. You will be very much involved. You will be into an interactive part of co-creating. It's that
We all have feelings, and we can be emotionally idiotic or we can be emotionally smart.
I strongly believe emotional intelligence is a lifestyle. You do it every single day.
So the research says that people don't leave organizations, they leave leaders. If you as a leader, if your actions inspire others to dream more, learn more, and do more, become more, then you are a true leader.
Optimism is a massive part of achieving your goals. You have to create possibility.
Especially in large organizations, there's a huge issue around trust. I think it diminishes organizations overall. So for me, it's holistic. You bring it to all aspects of your life, and I think in some ways that's life saving.
From process skills and knowledge skills, it will all come down to interpersonal skills, which is the emotional intelligence that we have.
And there's nothing like people. Emotions drive people, and people drive performance. So that connect came beautifully.
emotions, obviously. We, inside, know the direction to go. The question would be, how do we get there?
In 6 seconds, I can decide I'm going to be a part of making change happen and being a change maker in the world to help people develop greater insight, connection, and purpose.
And actually, that whole idea of emotion and cognition as two separate things is completely a myth. There's no such thing as thought without feeling. And there's actually no such thing as feeling without thought.
I'm committed to social and emotional intelligence because I know that the impact that it has on my life, and I know the impact that it can have upon me.
EQ is giving you permission to be me.
Because it just helps you to be intentional, to really think through, what do I really, really want out of this moment?
This is how respondents very speak. They don't speak to me. They know my intellect can be hijacked by my ego. Emotions guide the heart. That's what it comes together.
And I think this is, again, the common language of the universe. Whatever you see and think, everything always feels this connection.
The way to connect with the divine, the highest aspect, is by resonating with the pulse of beauty, goodness, and truth.
I have one insight, which is to change, and change towards meaningful purpose.
For me, it's really to connect with them, to engage with them, incorporate them in their daily life. This has been a tremendous journey. Lots of insights, lots of reflection. The knowledge that I have taken with me is huge.
The more we learn about how the brain works, the more equipped we are to make our meaningful choices and to use our emotional intelligence to the best of its ability.
Every time I'm learning more about it, I'm becoming better and better. To have access to all this information, all the energy, it changed my life. It changed my children's life. It changed my relationship. It made my business so much more vibrant, more successful, more meaningful, more purposeful.
We have a choice about our thoughts and our feelings and our actions. And when we take those choices, we change ourselves and we change the world. That's what emotional intelligence is all about. What are we doing? Sum that up. Which is your favorite part?
Okay. Let me stop that share. So that's the second time I've watched that video today. I actually have to find, I find it quite moving. And I think before we start, Susan, I'm going to just open this up to everybody and just see what sort of response that had from you. What happened with you when you saw that? Someone got a volunteer? Or didn't you have Finn? Good man.
This maybe shows where my emotional intelligence needs work, but I was initially had a gloss between the slick presentation and I couldn't quite get a grasp on the substance of it. So there's a disconnect between the subject and the presentation there for that on that video for me.
Okay. Anybody else?
I'm afraid I could hear nothing.
Oh.
No, there was some sound, but I was searching for a place to switch up the sound, but couldn't find it.
Okay, no idea why that happened. I assume everybody else could hear it.
I can hear you perfectly.
Yeah, okay.
I must say I had a garbled delivery too, so I missed a lot of it, including flashing
same,
pictures. So I don't know why. Yeah.
Okay, well that's something I've learned through share screening. Just sometimes maybe the bandwidth isn't enough to translate it. And it's a pity because there's the second question I would have asked you is, what words did you hear that you related to Aikido? which if you didn't hear it, you're going to struggle with, but hopefully some of you heard it.
Oh, none of it.
Okay.
No, didn't hear it.
There's,
Okay, well,
there's something about thought and feeling there, which being they're not opposites. They're.
I'm going to suggest you do watch it in your own time. So I'm going to put the link in the chat because I think it's well worth seeing.
Do you remember there was a thing, Quentin, when I tried to run a video and you had to do something with the sound?
I don't know what happened there. So pity. Someone should have stuck their hand up and said, I can't hear a damn thing. Next time, help me out, guys. Okay, there were an awful lot of words in there, like connection and balance. What else was there, Susan? Because my mind's got a blank after that. But a lot of other words there that immediately made me think of Aikido. Awareness, mindfulness, to name but a few. So let's go back to you, Susan. So you found emotional intelligence after a pretty successful corporate career.
Yes.
And you presumably wanted to pursue this because you could see the disconnect between what was going on typically in business and what you'd found through this emotional intelligence coaching. So
yeah, I think that business principles can easily overwhelm relational principles. And while I loved the challenge of my work in business, I didn't love some of the negative effects on people. And I thought, you know, I thought there must be a better way. And I came upon emotional intelligence, and the more I studied it, the more I realized that this was sort of the equivalent of the human theory of everything. You know, this is what makes you succeed or fail in business. This is what makes you succeed and fail at home. This is what makes your life rich and wonderful or difficult. And, you know, not that external circumstances don't affect us, they do, but as Viktor Frankl observed, in the end, the last freedom given to us is the freedom to choose our attitude in any given circumstance. And that's about emotional intelligence.
Yeah. And I think like Aikido, it starts with changing yourself and your responses to things. And that then springs out into helping to improve your relationships on a one-to-one, and then bigger and bigger and bigger until, if you can get the message translated out, everything becomes a little bit more healthy. Is that a fair summary?
Yes, indeed.
Okay.
And of course, when I started Aikido, although I was doing what the typical beginner did and thinking, you know, okay, where am I supposed to put my foot? Where's my hand going? You know, what is my center? But I was also amazed at how the physical principles really illustrated the emotional or psychological principles so well.
Right. So do you want to draw a few parallels for us there?
Sure. You can see the mind at work in technique, right? You can see the mind and character of the person come out, especially beginners when they come on the mats, right? There's the beginner who wants to just overpower everybody and use a whole bunch of muscle and force to get through the technique. And then there's the paint by numbers beginner who goes, okay, step 1, move, step 2, move, step 3, move. There's the beginner that overanalyzes everything, and then if they can't get their mind functioning, they can't get their body moving, you know, and these are all things that happen inside of us on other levels as well.
So in the practice of business, you inevitably you reveal yourself, because you can't hide every day 9 till 5 and be someone different. And I always feel you can't hide on the mat either. Your real self is revealed there. So it's quite a nice parallel, I think. And what you find, it's up to you whether you decide to change it or not. So were you actually employed by somebody when you found this and you began to implement it into the business, or did you kind of walk away from business, find this, and then go back to business?
Well, I was actually, I had, it was the third decade of my business career. I had taken on the helm of a nonprofit, so I was the executive director, and the nonprofit's function and mission was to sort of do something about the atrocious divorce rate and try to strengthen relationships. And you know, I learned all kinds of tools for that. There's many, many communication tools and great programs, but there's a slight problem with all of them, I found after a while, which is the best communication tool in the world cannot overcome the built up hostility toward each other that married couples get into when their relationship isn't going well. You know, great communication just makes me more skilled at wielding the knife, but it doesn't change my desire to use the knife.
Yeah.
And so I wondered, okay, how do I deal with that? How do I address this underlying antagonism and get them to a place they're coming, searching for some support, and yet, you know, they only have one foot in that camp and the other foot is in the camp of I got to protect myself and I've got to punish you for all these years of suffering. So when I found emotional intelligence, it was kind of a eureka because it nicely tied my business self and my social science self together. As I began to work at that level of emotional intelligence with couples, I started to see them able to move off the friend-enemy thinking into more cooperative ways of being, especially when I also integrated Aikido principles.
Right. Would it be possible to give a simple example of how you brought a warring couple together by some of the techniques that you use?
Sure. Well, just take a simple one. Imagine, you know, one spouse standing facing the other and extending the arms as we like to do in Aikido. And so I will start the illustration about how we are all responsible for our own emotions, even though we tend to blame our spouse for our emotions, but we're really responsible for our own, by having them grab onto each other's hands, but doing so from an unbalanced position. So I have them deliberately go unbalanced and then grab the other person's hands. And then I say, okay, what does that feel like? And how would you describe a relationship that has this kind of dynamic going on? So you can imagine some words that might come up. You know, if I'm off balance and I'm hanging onto your arms, what are you going to feel, Quentin?
Uncomfortable, fearful,
uncomfortable,
distrusting, perhaps.
Yeah, and it feels heavy, and you don't want to go on supporting me, and all of those other things. And I also know it. I know I'm dependent on you for my balance, and that doesn't feel good. And then I'll have them go to Shizentai and grab onto each other, and oh yeah, that feels pretty good, only because they don't know about Hanmi. And then when I finally have them take Hanmi and connect, then suddenly it's like, oh, this feels completely different. This is real connection. This is real cooperative connection. And I don't feel vulnerable, and I also don't feel like you are a threat to me anymore because I have my own center. I have my own stability. And I'll incorporate little things like a little bit of a light push, you know, in each of those positions. And, you know, what's your story about the other person? If you're already off balance and you get a light push, emotionally, what do you say about that person? He's a bully, she's so mean, you know, whatever our story becomes. And then when they get into Hanmi and find that a light push does nothing, I find that rather than going to explain the whole theory of emotional distancing and why it's necessary, they can feel it in their body, and the light bulb just turns on.
So how do you then manage to switch them so they understand the concept of what it needs to, what their relationship needs to feel like, emotionally as well as physically? How do you then introduce techniques that get them to treat each other in the way that provides that necessary balance and connection?
Well, first of all, disclaimer, I'm not a miracle worker. I can show them the way, but only they can practice.
I've heard that before.
But, you know, when they get it, then we can talk about situations that they're going through in terms of who's feeling that push, who's feeling that pull, who's feeling off balance, who's, you know,
right.
And they can start to take ownership of things like, oh, I see that I was blaming you for my feeling, but I really need to own it.
Got it. Okay, so you just gave us a beautiful illustration of how the somatic or embodied feelings within Aikido can really help in another domain. A very powerful tool for making a point. Did you have those tools available when you first started emotional intelligence coaching, or did you start Aikido and think, hey, there's something useful I can use here?
Yeah, the second one.
Right.
Yeah.
So I guess I have to ask you, why did you come to Aikido then?
Well, because I'm a parent, and my daughter at the time, who was, I think she was 8, and she came home one day and she said, I want to do karate. And I was like, karate? She said, yeah, you know, punching and kicking and stuff. Now, we haven't gotten into my background, but one facet of my background is the fact that I grew up in Japan, although I did not practice any martial arts there, but I certainly had a working familiarity with them. And I lived in the Kobe, Osaka region where Steven Seagal was. In fact, he used to teach Aikido at my high school. I considered this 8-year-old, and I thought, I don't want you to have a black belt in 2 years and think you can do something when you can't, just because you've learned a bunch of kata. So I looked to see if there was Aikido in Green Bay, and I found one. And when I called to ask about children's classes, they told me they had a rule that if there's a child going to a children's class, there has to be an adult member who also practices. And what don't we do for our kids, right?
That's emotional intelligence for you.
So I started, she quit after a year, and here I still am.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about the parallels you see between Aikido and emotional intelligence, and what particularly you find powerful about the one that helps the other. And I guess it's a two-way process.
Mm-hmm. It is. I sometimes, will say it in the reverse way on the mats with my students. They'll be doing something and I'll say, this is just like, on psychologically speaking, we have to do X, Y, Z. So I mix them in both domains. I mix them. I can't help it. But I think, take, for example, the construction of a technique that was taught by Akira Tohei Shihan. He was the one that founded the Midwest Aikido Federation in Chicago back in the late 1960s, early 1970s. And he taught that there were 3 steps to constructing a technique. One is make 2 lines. In other words, make 2 different lines. 2 is make harmony, and 3 is stay safe. Okay. So those are principles that I folded into what I now call EQ-Do, and the link you showed to that video is on my EQ-Do site. But I can think of, or I attach certain principles for conflict resolution to those 3 physical principles. Okay, so can I talk through those a little bit?
I would be delighted if you would, because I was going to ask you to do just that.
Okay. So the first one, make 2 lines. On the physical level, what does that mean? Why do we make 2 lines, Quentin?
I was hoping you were going to tell me that.
Well, here's the freight train coming down the tracks. Do we ever put our hands up and say, stop, train, stop?
Yeah, absolutely. So you've got it going, you're working in the same direction, or at least have the chance to.
Yeah, so you go off on an angle, you take a vector, you go to a 45, you go to a 180, you do whatever you do physically so that you're not head on into the incoming force.
Got it.
So that's the first step of constructing any technique. Make 2 lines, get off the line, right? We say all the time. So for me, what on the emotional level, what often happens in conflict is, I'll just use an example of a husband and wife coming home at the end of the day, and they're both tired. And she says, let's go out to eat. And the guy says, are you crazy? I just got home. I don't want to go anywhere. And then it starts to escalate. Well, you never want to go anywhere. You never want to do anything. You're right. And they're off to the races. So they haven't made 2 lines. They're doing a tug of war over whether they're going to stay home or go out. They're on the same line fighting over the same question. And so to me, make 2 lines means we need to slow down here. And instead of having a tug of war over these things, which are really wants based on needs, right? Instead of getting trapped into a tug of war on the same line, the first thing that has to happen is we need to remember there are two individuals that each have their own needs and their own wants. And let's start by clearly identifying the wants. So what is it you're seeking? So let's just role play with me, just have fun. I'm the wife. I came home and said, let's go out to eat. And you said, no, I want to stay home. I just got home. I'm tired.
Yeah, I'm just so tired. I don't want to go out.
Yeah.
I'm exhausted.
Yeah, I'm exhausted. So, okay, you are exhausted. You don't want to go out. Well, I'm also exhausted and I really don't want to expend the energy to both cook and then do all the cleaning, washing up afterwards. So, that's my goal. What's your goal for staying home?
My goal is to not have to feel like I gotta be chatty and be bright with everybody, and I just need to veg out tonight.
Okay.
It sounds like you need to too.
I need to veg out. I need relief from tasks. You need relief from chattiness with people. Okay?
Okay, got it.
Now, we've identified two individual goals. So we've made two lines. Okay, I see it more clearly. Okay, I understand what you're wanting. Now the second stage in constructing a technique is to make harmony. And thank you, Linda. I just saw your chat pop up. So we want to make harmony. In order to do that, there's something underlying both of us, and it's pretty obvious in this example. We each have a need, an actual need for rest. Now, I make a distinction between needs and wants. I really say a need is an innate or inborn human characteristic, right? We all need rest. We don't make it up. We can't accuse me of being selfish because I'm tired and need rest. It's to be human is to have those needs. But a want is my strategy for getting my need met, which is what I presented to you when I came home. Let's go out to eat. That's my strategy. That's my want. That's how I want it, my need for rest to be met.
Got it.
So I think cooperation requires that we both get very clear about what underlying needs are. Your need is also to rest. But in your case, rest is defined as not having to interact with other people. In my case, rest means not having to do a specific task. So we have harmony because we both understand our common human need now. I can respect your need for rest. Hopefully you can respect mine. So now we can get to the third step, the stay safe, which is, in Aikido terms, that's the throw or the pin or whatever it is we do. But in EQ terms, that's cooperating to find a strategy that meets both of our needs. So you just don't want to deal with other people. I just don't want to do cook and do dishes. How do we solve this problem together now that we understand that? If I grant you the dignity of your own need, which is you don't want to go out and have to interact with anyone, that's not really why I'm asking, right? I just don't want to cook and do dishes. So do you have any suggestions?
I think we're doing takeaway tonight.
Or paper plates.
I think you should cook and wash up.
That might work as well because I find cooking very therapeutic. So,
Quentin, you might find that meets your needs. If you're cooking and washing up, you're being left alone. Or maybe it's takeout and paper plates, as Paul Linden suggested, and we agree that you're going to watch television and I'm going to play on my smartphone.
Got it.
But we each get what we want here, and that's the basis of cooperation. And I think that's something really important to understand, and something that Aikido teaches, right? There's uke and nage, and we take turns being both. But in life, different personalities tend to adopt different power strategies, and there are individuals that really gravitate toward the dominating end where I get to win and you have to lose. And that's usually around my strategy, right? My strategy is going to prevail. I'm going to browbeat you into doing what I want, or complain or do whatever it takes to bully you into me getting my way. People who adopt lose-win strategies, nice people, nicest people in the world, but that's really a strategy of self-subjugation. That's neither of those two are cooperation. Right? That's like always being the uke or always being the nage and never playing the opposite role.
So how does this play out when you're working with businesses?
There's all kinds of parallels in business. You know, the person who wants to win every argument at home doesn't suddenly go into work and become a compliant, you know, agreeable sort. It's the same dynamic. It's just transferred to the business meeting and whose idea is going to prevail, or, you know, it's I'm going to have my department win at all costs, and therefore I don't care if you had something planned with your family this weekend, you're going to work overtime.
Right.
You know,
so when you've got a dominating persona like that, the last thing I would imagine they want to do is talk to you saying, look, you arsehole, you've got it completely wrong. So how does that conversation begin?
well, you know, if I talk to people about these power dynamics, I will say, well, which one do you think you gravitate toward most? And there's one I've left out, which is the lose-lose, otherwise known as passive aggression, which everyone hates. Okay. But most people will actually be able to pick themselves out quite readily. And you'd be surprised the number of dominating personalities who say, oh yeah, I'm the win-lose, I know I am. Now, I've run into a few who won't say that. They say, well, I can be either, I can be any. One woman in particular, I remember, was causing a lot of trouble in her department at business. And I said, so you think you're all of them and you can't pick one you use most often? No. I said, okay, well, I'd like to ask your coworkers what they think you are. Well, I know what they're going to say. Oh, you do? What is it they're going to say? Well, they're going to say I'm the win-lose. So she knew, she just didn't want to admit it.
And how did the conversation go from that point? Presumably you said, well, if that's their perception, perhaps that's what we need to work with or something.
Well, again, I'm not a magician or a miracle worker. If someone truly does not want any influence or any, it's like, I'm going to go show up on the Aikido mat, but I'm not going to touch anybody. I refuse to pick a partner. I'm not going to grab onto you. At that point, it's like, well, okay, sit on the side of the mat if that's what you want to do. You know, I can't make somebody want to learn, but for anybody who does want to learn, what I talk about is the fact that there's a particular skill that pulls the lose in either column up, right? So for those people who need to value the other person's win equally to their own, they need to focus on the skill of empathy.
Right.
And for those who need to learn to value their own win equal to others, they need to focus on the skill of setting boundaries and presenting or self-advocating for their own needs. And see, that's just where Aikido is a brilliant example too, because it's balancing, right? We tend to come either too strong or I don't want to hurt anybody, and too soft on the mat.
Yeah. So how do you get them to practice empathy or setting boundaries?
Well, we talk about different situations and that can come up, that have recently come up, and we say, okay, well, what was it? What did you do? What was your normal reaction? Okay, now how would we rewrite this script to make it more effective?
Right.
And we role play, and I tell them, look, you're gonna role play, you're gonna prepare, you're gonna rehearse, you're gonna come up with a different answer, like an actor learning their lines and their role, and then you're gonna go out there on stage and you're gonna completely mess it up. That's okay. That's part of the learning process. We don't change that quickly.
Yeah. There seems some obvious parallels with practice on the mat, though.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and our brains have an error rate. At least mine does. I mean, I can do an Aikido technique 10 times in a row very well, and the 11th time I'll completely muff it up. I don't know why, but I just do.
I don't think you would be unique in that. I think that would be a fairly common experience. It's going great, and then you change partner, and all of a sudden it won't work at all.
Yeah, or the teacher looks at you.
Yeah, or the
It's always a
teacher.
guarantee.
That's always a good one. We love that. So how has emotional intelligence deepened your Aikido practice? And then we'll reverse it. How did Aikido deepen your emotional intelligence practice?
Ooh, that's a good one. I think that because the love of emotional intelligence preceded Aikido, I think that it made me more take to Aikido more than I would have otherwise, because I kept seeing all these wonderful physical illustrations of the work I was doing.
Right.
And so it was really fascinating and engaging my mind on these parallel journeys and how they were each an illustration of the other. So I don't think I would have stuck with it, maybe. Especially because, hey, let's face it, it's kind of frustrating to learn, right?
It can be, but I would think so is emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
I would think that's a lifetime's journey too, somehow.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. But it seems to me that emotional intelligence, at least for most practitioners, is more in the head and heart, if you like. And they may not necessarily see what that means in their body. Whereas in Aikido, it's more about body, and people don't necessarily understand there's a link to their heart and their head. The two seem to provide a brilliant balance and show the link between each other.
They definitely do. And in fact, one of the things I teach both on the mats and off the mats is to link up 4 key intelligence centers in the body. Head being the first one, but a lot of us have been trained to approach life from the shoulders up, you know, or our consciousness, our energy is focused up here in our thoughts.
Sure.
The heart, we feel at times, other times we ignore it. But one of the things they said on the video that kind of came through on the sound was, you know, you can't have thought without feeling or feeling without thought. They're really one. And, you know, our practice in Aikido is to try to integrate the body and make it one.
Yeah.
Well, same thing here. We're trying to integrate these wisdom centers. So we have head, we have heart. I also teach people to learn to listen to their gut, and then finally their one point, their dantian or their core. All of them, all of those parts of the body have a unique kind of wisdom and intelligence that they have access to. And to me, the definition of wholeness, oneness, integrity is when all those parts agree. They each have their different perspective and contribution, but we feel conflict when my head says one thing and my heart says another. Or maybe my head and my gut have a problem, but my heart doesn't have a problem. And the core is all about, you know, stability, safety, and survival. A lot of times people, when they go down to the core, say, oh, we're going to be all right. But up here, I'm having this argument in these different parts of myself. And that's where the feeling of stress comes from.
Right. So how do you get people to recognize where the conflict is arising? Is that simple?
Check in. It's mindfulness, like we talked about. Slow down, stop, check in. What is your head's perspective on that? What's your brain or mind perspective on this? What are your thoughts saying? What are your beliefs saying? Then how does your heart feel about it? Let's just let's take another example. Let's say your career, your work, or whatever it is you do as a vocation. Your mind has thoughts about it. I love this job. I hate this job. But this job is okay. I have to do this job for the money. My boss is awesome. My boss sucks. You know, whatever it is, right? We got a story going on in our mind. If you drop again into your heart, you're going to find that your heart has its own perspective and reasons about that vocation. Okay? And it's meeting needs, it's not meeting needs, it's making you feel connected or not, or you've got a passion or a love for it, or, you know, whatever is going on with you. Drop again into your gut, there's your intuition kicking in. Intuition tends to say things like, you know, this really isn't the lifelong path for me, or this is, I'm totally in the right place, or, you know, I have a feeling that this, I'm going to end up getting fired from this position because it's not going well with my boss, or whatever it is. And then finally, you know, so all of those different parts have a perspective. And if you just slow down to check in, you'll suddenly find out like, oh, my mind and my heart are settled, but my gut is unsettled, or whatever it is. And then that gives you a direction for self-inquiry to identify needs, which are the heart of everything we do.
And I've got a feeling that you might have used your intuition once or twice and it's made some big changes in your life. So how's that worked out for you?
Well, I call it the little voice, right? We all have it when we slow down and listen. And, you know, whenever I've listened to the little voice, I've been very happy I did. And there's times when you think it's your own thoughts and you don't pay attention to it. And later on, you're like, I should have listened. Little things to big things, right? But yeah, when I listen, I usually end up very happy that I did listen.
Yep.
And that feels like acting from my own center. That feels like doing technique from a balanced place.
Sure. Great. So I'm going to open this up to people to, if they have any questions. I feel there must be one or two.
I do.
Yes, Steve, go for it.
When you are training, so to speak, or therapy, do you join the mind and the body as a whole as one thing, or are you feeding one off the other one to learn, you know, to pick up different information? Now, in my case, I would feel somebody move, so I would know what state of mind they're in by the movement that they make.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if somebody can see, are they looking at the whole thing?
Usually not in the beginning, right? In the beginning, we get kind of tunnel vision. We get focused on details. We get focused on things we don't like. That's the first thing most people are in touch with emotionally is I don't like that, right? I don't want that.
No, it doesn't. No.
And I find as a coach, when I say, well, what do you want? Oftentimes people have difficulty answering that question.
Right.
They're much more in touch with what I don't like it. I don't like that. I say, okay, you've eliminated one possibility. There are now 10 million others.
Right.
Versus being able to say, I want this. Now I've eliminated 10 million possibilities and settled on one. And it's far easier for someone to cooperate with us when we're clear.
Mm-hmm.
So usually I find that people start off in a conflict situation or with a problem disconnected. The different parts of themselves are fragmented. They haven't really inquired of all of those different parts. They haven't really slowed down. They just feel the conflict between them.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems to me, you know, Steve's blinding. I think you probably knew that. But, you know, sighted people very often are really lousy at seeing. They don't really see. Whereas Steve, who doesn't have sight, is probably much more perceptive on the other things that most of us miss. Do you think that's true?
Yeah. Yeah, slightly, yeah, because your perspective on a different, not different level, but different way of doing the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Collecting the information, it's faster because you feel more when you can see it. If you put a burner on a cooker and it's on,
yeah,
you can feel the heat before you actually see it.
Sure.
So therefore, you're gathering energy very much quicker than you can if you look for it.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Jamie, did you still have a question?
I
No.
do. I do. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
5 more days. I'm going to be.
Yay!
I'm getting there. Oh, I can almost smile, but I'm going to get these braces off. So we're getting close. Anyways, hi, Susan.
Hi, Jamie.
I don't know. Quentin, did you mention that Susan has joined our board?
I did. Well, I put it in my original Facebook posting. Yeah.
Oh, good. Yeah. Anyway, it's wonderful to have Susan working with Aiki Extensions now at that level. Okay, so I had a question. You talked earlier about
with clients, like, you can tell them stuff and then you can somatically get them to work with it. And that makes a big difference. So that's, kind of point A, right? Central point. Question is, do you find it that people are willing? Do they like getting physically involved if you're in a session with them? Do they kind of go, I don't know if I want to do this? Do they feel funny, or does it kind of energize them and interest them? So just kind of wondering what your experience has been in terms of people's willingness to engage at that level.
Yeah, well, I don't assume ever that they are willing. So that's the first thing, is I always start by asking permission. I'd like to give you a physical example. It would involve you grabbing my wrist. Would you be comfortable with that? So, I always start with that. And one thing that I learned from Paul Linden Sensei is you have to be so very, very gentle with what people can handle in their physical space. Typically, I'm not dealing with somebody that's coming to me because of serious trauma, because they'd be going to a psychotherapist, not a coach, right? But we all have stresses and strains and that kind of thing, and we all have different levels of comfort and tolerance. And I guess I probably use a combination of intuition and permission. There are some people that I just intuit. This would probably be too much for them, a little overwhelming. So I'll keep it lighter. And I might then describe, or I might just show them with my own posture without touching them. So I do use that little voice in the third intelligence center. Yes, Piers.
No, I wasn't trying to stop you. I was trying to get Quentin's attention. I want to answer questions.
I wanted to ask you, let me just finish. I just wanted to ask you a little further, Susan, if you found that, or if you find that sometimes the somatic, getting them involved physically, actually breaks the ice a lot more, or gets people relating, or kind of having fun, and all of a sudden things kind of move to another level.
Oh, definitely. I think that they will learn the insights much more quickly, much more directly and viscerally when they do it somatically, and they will retain that insight versus me sort of lecturing them or trying to get them to study some kind of psychological principle.
Makes perfect sense. Piers.
Susan, men are usually, or women are usually are supposed to have more emotional intelligence than men. Would you say that is true? And then secondary question, does it actually, do you find that men who practice Aikido maybe are more on par with women who have a high level of emotional intelligence?
Okay, two-part question. That's good.
Great questions.
Yeah. I don't think it's true that men have a lower emotional intelligence than women. My perspective is that we tend to have different strengths in the EQ department. And I put that partly down to the gender conditioning process. If you think of emotions, simple emotions, depending on which gender you're born as, certain negative emotional expressions will be sort of swatted down and others will be allowed. And those clusters of emotion are different. So if you take the three big umbrellas of negative emotion of sadness, fear, and anger, okay, and there are many, many permutations underneath, but those three classes of emotion. So think about a woman, and in your mind, what would give me the most sympathy from you if I expressed it?
Tears, sadness.
Okay, sadness. Okay, good. So what would give me probably the least chance of succeeding of those three emotions if I displayed it?
Probably anger for me.
Probably anger, right? And that's women's universal experience. It's not socially acceptable for a woman to be angry. She's called names, all kinds of things. So enculturated from a very young age to damp down certain emotions and the actions that go with them and amp up others. And it's just the reverse for men.
I actually, if a man expressed anger to me, they would get nowhere as well, actually.
Well, it's probably true, but it's more acceptable. And like if a guy is a little hot-headed, it's like, well, you know, and there's just some, you know, settle down, but it's sort of acceptable. But it's not very acceptable for a man to express a lot of fear, to be a coward, so to speak.
Yeah.
Suck it up, be a man, right? You hear those words.
Do you think that's changing though in this modern world, you know, with all the social media, the films that express men can have emotions and women can show power? Do you think
Yes.
that's changing? I think it is.
Yes, I do. I think with the younger generation it's changing, and I think that's a good thing. But
Yeah.
I think I'm 57 years old, and it certainly was not that way when I was growing up.
And what about my second question?
Aikido. And I think Aikido is the great balancer. It's the middle way. So whatever areas that you came in with excess in will tend to be moderated by Aikido, and where maybe if there's a deficiency, it's brought up. And I think, you know, I see a lot of women uncomfortable exercising power on the mats, you know, oh, I don't want to hurt anybody. And, you know, they have a hard time getting to control. And stereotypically, a lot of men use too much power on the mat in the beginning. They need to learn to get softer. Whether they connect it to emotional intelligence or not, I think is a completely different question. I hope I will not offend anybody if I say that I've seen very senior Aikido people seem to be completely still enwrapped in their own ego and having...
No, surely not. I can't believe it. Really?
None of us can relate to that. I don't know what you're talking about there.
You guys are killing me.
See, you made Jamie get rid of herself there. She's so shocked.
Oh my God.
That's an interesting disconnect, isn't it? You would have thought that at least as you became more skilled, even at the technique level of Aikido, that somehow this other stuff must filter in and be part of the reason. But now you come to mention it, I think you're probably right. It isn't necessarily for some.
But it can be fuel to the fire on the other side, Quen.
Yeah.
It can be. It can be. And I think a lot of it depends on a number of factors. The sensei you have, the federation you're part of, the spirit of the dojo you're in, and your own proclivities all play a part, I think, in that.
Sure. So do you find there's a difference in cultures? I mean, we talked about men-women differentiation. It's always a generalization, of course, but across different cultures, does that also come out in different ways?
EQ?
Yeah.
Yes. On a national or international level, there's a sort of state of EQ study that's done by the 6 Seconds organization every year. And different cultures have different strengths on EQ as well. You know, that's just generalization again, but like in Asian cultures, for example, people tend to not handle conflict directly, right? And maybe American culture, we tend to handle things too directly, you know? So, you know, in Aikido terms, America's that person that comes on the mat and uses too much power in the beginning. But also people are people everywhere. So Molly, did you have a question? I thought you were raising your hand.
Oh no, that was a wave.
Oh.
That was just hello, I finally arrived with computer. Here I am.
What's the meaning of the 6 seconds? Does that have a... It seemed there must be something why it's called 6 seconds. Why is that?
Indeed. 6 seconds is the average length of time that a cascade of neurohormones that is produced by the brain floods through the system and changes the receptors on every cell in your body. So you could say a primary emotional reaction lasts about 6 seconds.
Patrick, you had a question.
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can't see you, but we can hear you.
Yeah, I was wondering about what Susan thought about as the male ego with the teachers, what she thought about the structure of the pyramid structure hierarchy,
Oh,
if that contributed any to it.
you're pinching a topic for one of my sessions.
Hierarchy is certainly something that that changes power structures. I don't know of too many places that have actually done away with human hierarchies altogether. I think we're all pretty comfortable in that. I think, again, a lot of factors probably converge to determine whether you're going to treat your ascent in the hierarchy more as, now I have much more obligation to serve and to humble myself and to work on my ego, because to whom much is given, much is expected, or whether you take it the other way and say, I'm all that, man, I got a yondan. Woohoo!
Yeah, because I've also experienced it between Kohai Senpai relationships as well. That's why I'm wondering.
Yeah, so if that those people had more emotional intelligence, you would hope that that would influence their Aikido, right?
Yeah, yes. Thank you.
Jamie, you had another question.
I would just sort of opine, I guess, give my opinion that in terms of business leadership, that what we're seeing, and there's starting to be a little more emphasis, even since COVID, on the emotional, the EQ component of leadership, and particularly people are talking now about empathy, and that's so important. And one of the things we see, this isn't to be political, but I mean, if you look at Trump, I mean, let's say he lacks just like IQ, but it's the EQ he lacks that's just so intense, just so absurd, you know, and that's just such a problem, I would say. So I just kind of wonder what you are finding, and if you're noticing that, especially since COVID has begun, that people are, and leaders are in business, are talking more about that kind of ability to be empathetic, to care, to identify with where people are at, you know, emotionally, that it's not just, like, as you were saying earlier, it's that the relational aspect of leadership is important, just as the business per se parts are.
Yeah, I think that, you know, again, the individual proclivities are just revealed by the pressure of the COVID situation. You know, who you are comes out in every situation. So you know, I know CEOs who are like, well, we're not wearing masks here, and, you know, they got zero empathy, or seemingly zero empathy for their people. And others who, you know, right away said, if you don't feel safe, you know, we're going to make arrangements for you. Other companies in the area who have given people bonuses to come in and work during COVID because they're so essential, and they realize there's an increased hazard. And, you know, I don't think there's one way that I've seen it handled. The people who are compassionate to begin with tend to use that strength and become even more compassionate.
Finn, did you have a question?
I'm not going to formulate everything that everybody's saying, all the other questions that they keep giving me other things to think about, but thinking about Trump as well, but with lack of emotional intelligence. But what's perhaps shocking is that it does seem to connect on a very visceral, emotional level with a huge number of people, significant number of people, hopefully not too significant number of people. But my initial question was about whether a little knowledge in this area as an Aikido can be a dangerous or at least confusing thing, and how you're obviously continuing to think and thought deeply about it, but how does one embark on a path of developing emotional intelligence?
Well, that's a great question. It is a path. It is a way. It is a do, just like anything. So I think there's, you know, it's necessary to understand that there's two parts of it. One is the intrapersonal, and the other is the interpersonal. So as far as intrapersonal goes, it's about us learning to navigate our own emotions, and because I'm a somatic practitioner, it's about us learning to be grounded in and integrated in our own body and mind. so that we're neither repressing our emotions nor are we being reactive to them, but that we're very clearly able to identify what we're thinking, how we're feeling, how we're acting, those three circles that were in the video, and what's at the heart of it, which is really our needs. The beauty of learning to really identify needs is that 1,000 strategies become available to you. When you know your need is for rest, how many ways are there for you to meet your need for rest? When you know your need is for respect, how many ways are there for you to get that need met? Instead, we tend to get tunnel vision and focus on one particular strategy. We confuse the strategy with the need. In fact, we'll say it that way. I need you to do the laundry so I can go mow the lawn. Right? Need you. It's not a need. That's my strategy. What I need is perhaps mutuality. I need to feel like we're both carrying equal share of the load. Maybe that's my need. Maybe I just need help, assistance. It's feeling too heavy. I'd like you to help me with this. But again, if I make the mistake of focusing on the strategy and thinking that's my need, then I get very rigid, I get very unyielding, and it's my way or the highway. Or I'll tend to interpret your lack of cooperation as you don't care. You don't care about me because I asked you to help me with the laundry and you said no, so therefore you don't love me, right? Or in the business meeting, you keep shooting down my ideas, therefore you have no respect for me. Right?
So I wonder if this is a parallel with Aikido too. So I always have this great hope that Aikido will help save the world and all that. I'm sure EQ practitioners feel the same. What sort of expansion is going on with EQ? How successful is it as a movement in terms of getting this message across?
I think it is expanding all the time. Nobody had really heard of it or discussed it back in 1995 when Daniel Goleman, who was a New York Times science writer, came out with the book Emotional Intelligence. That's sort of what brought it mainstream. Before that, it was really the province of academics. But you know, Harvard Business School came out about 10 years ago with an article that said, you know, we are in the third era of management science. It's the era of empathy.
Right.
And they made the point that, you know, to begin with, the first management science grew out of mass production. And so, you know, Henry Ford famously figured out how to produce at scale. And that then became all the management science was around producing at scale. And if you wanted to be competitive, you had to learn to produce at scale. Well, then everyone learned how. So now what's your next competitive advantage? Well, then that was specialization. You know, we can make you a car in any color you want, and you can pick all your accessories and your package, and you can outfit it and trim it and do all this special stuff. And that management science was around how to specialize while producing at scale. And now everyone's learned to do that as well. Think of a coffee shop. You know, you walk in, you expect your coffee within whatever it is, 60 seconds of ordering, you expect it to be excellent, you expect the flavor and the freshness, all of that. You won't even give them their business if they can't do that. But why do you go to one coffee shop over another now? It's because of aesthetics. It's because of the feeling you get when you're there. It's because of the customer experience. It's the era of empathy. This is now the new competitive edge, is emotional intelligence.
So there's hope for the world then.
Well, there's always got to be hope, right?
Yeah.
It ain't over until the fat lady sings.
Absolutely. Have you got a few simple exercises which maybe you practice on a regular basis to sort of enhance your emotional intelligence skills that you could share?
Simple practices. That's an interesting one. Well, I think I was, when I was describing the intrapersonal and the interpersonal, I think the intrapersonal practice is the practice of clearly identifying your needs and freeing your mind from the trap of strategy, right? It's randori. You got to learn to flow, right? So instead of dealing with one particular attacker and one particular attack, you have to learn to really identify that baseline need. And there's no known definitive list of human needs, but there are some suggestions you can go find at the Center for Nonviolent Communication. They have a needs list and they have a feelings list. Feelings are what we experience when our needs are met or are not met. Okay, so clarity on needs, your own, is the starting place. And then on the interpersonal, I think it's important for you to identify, you know, which column you need to emphasize the win in more. If you know that you tend to be a bull in a china shop, a steamroller, you tend to roll other people and leave emotional destruction in your wake, you need to really focus on empathy, which means you need to go find the skills. And the best practice for developing empathy is called listening. Listen to the other people around you. Really, truly listen to them. Stop talking. Stop pushing your own agenda, and start finding out what's in their heart and what their true needs are.
So we just come back to the needs for a second, because that seems to be really central to all of this.
Mm-hmm.
Do you develop a practice of saying, well, what do you need here? Is that kind of an automatic question that you tend to come up with?
Yes. What do you want? What do you need? What can I do? What are you asking for? But also reflective listening. It sounds like you're really frustrated about X. You know, here's a guess. Would this help if I did X? No, that's not what I need at all. Okay, what would help, right? So there's some investigation work that has to be done. That's if you fall into the win-lose camp. If you're more of a lose-win person, you need to develop the courage to speak up, which again starts with that clarity about your own needs, and then the courage to start asking for your needs to be met as well as the other person's. Yes, I can see that it would be very important to you. Let me add that this is also very important to me. Let's see if we can come up with something that will meet both our needs.
Beautiful. So I'm going to ask if anybody else has any comments or final questions, but I think otherwise you've really done a great job tonight, Susan. Thank you so much. It's been really good to listen to you and to see those parallels and see how those two practices have strengthened each other, because I think they definitely have. Any final questions or comments?
Terrific session.
There you go. My big bro says it all. Okay, well then it just remains for me to thank you all for coming once again. And next week, we don't have a guest. How do we fancy tackling hierarchy in Aikido? Its benefits, weaknesses, etc. Why are we so hierarchical in Aikido? Is it doing its job?
Whatever you say, Sensei.
It is a touchy-feely subject, but I think it's worthy of exploration. You know, so if that would be of interest to people, we'll facilitate a discussion on that. Yep. Okay, great. I look forward to it. And Sean, just so you know, I have got your email, and I will read through them, and I'll see what we can pick from that.
Excellent. Yeah. Thank you so much.
All right. So thank you one and all. Thank you especially, Susan, and good to see you're still on the mend, Jamie.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Wonderful.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yep. Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Quentin.
My
Bye.
My pleasure. See you all.
Yeah.
Susan, I'm afraid I spaced out for most of that. The Lyme disease seems to have nailed my brain. Sorry.
No worries. You look much better now, though, for a little ziz, Paul. So you can always catch the recording anyway. I think you will really relate to what was talked about. So
I'm sure. I'm sure anything Susan says must have been great. Must have been very healing for me. Thank you, guys.
I think it was, Paul. I think that's what happened.
Yeah.
It has that effect.
That's good.
Yeah,
It's nice to know.
I only got 25 minutes of it, and it was extremely rich. So now I got to go back and listen to the front end.
Yes, me too.
We should be the same time difference as we were before now, Molly. So it's always 7 p.m. GMT time.
11 o'clock here.
You got it.
Where are you? Oh,
I'm in California.
okay. Thanks, guys. See you later.
See you all. Close